Judicial Watch is doing the work of the Justice Department when it comes to election integrity. And you may recall that we've sent warning letters to 11 states warning them that they have many places in their states and counties in their states where they have more people on the rolls than are eligible to vote. Now, federal law, the National Voter Registration Act, requires states to take reasonable steps to clean up the rolls. And if you got more people on the rolls than are eligible to vote, that's a pretty good indication you're not taking reasonable steps to clean up the rolls. And in the case of California, California is the 12th state we warned about this issue, because we looked at various counties in California, and you have, in San Francisco, they have 114% of the voting age population on the rolls. So that means that people who moved away and dead people aren't being removed. That's what it means. And there are other ineligible people who aren't being removed from the rolls. San Francisco, 114%. Los Angeles, 112%. And that number is the official number. We talked to Los Angeles County officials in investigating this issue, and they said, oh no, it's not 112%. Their latest numbers are that it's 144%. It's a nightmare. San Diego, another major metropolitan area, 138%. Again, they've got 138% of their eligible population on their voting rolls. So that means everyone in the county who's alive and eligible to vote, they've got 38% more on the rolls.
It is worth noting that California is one of the states that Donald Trump singled out for voter fraud right after the election, he put out on Twitter. So, Secretary, 2 months have passed since the election. Have there been any credible allegations of voter fraud in your state in this election?
Good morning, Kate, and thank you for bringing up that question, because it was around Thanksgiving weekend where President Trump first started not just alleging millions of cases of voter fraud across the country, but naming specific states, California among them. We pushed back at the time saying, hey, we take allegations of voter fraud seriously. If you do have any information or proof of it, please bring it forward. We're happy to investigate. Months have passed, zero proof, zero evidence. And so, here's my concern as he's repeating these allegations. First, my concern as an elections administrator is he's simply setting the tone for any policy changes that will go further backwards as it pertains to voting rights. We already have needless barriers to voter registration, needless barriers to the ballot box for eligible voters, not just in California, but around the country. We see what's happening in Texas, North Carolina, Ohio, et cetera. In California, we're trying to show a different way, but calling for a massive investigation when there's no basis for it is dangerous. It's not productive. It's a distraction, as you've said, and my fear is that it sets up the changes in law as it pertains to access to the ballot for Americans.
So, Mr. Secretary, you called the investigation dangerous. Will you cooperate with the federal investigation?
Look, we cooperate with federal government as we're required to, and we're happy to do so. But I think it's also our obligation to push back and say, hey, this makes sense, this does not make sense. Just as alleging voter fraud on a rampant scale without proof or without any evidence is harmful to democracy, so is an investigation that's not based on anything other than somebody's ego.
And to put a fine point on it, Mr. Secretary, when you say there's zero proof, there is zero proof that have there been any allegations of voter fraud in California that your agency is looking at right now?
To my knowledge, there's no cases of irregularities or cause for investigation to voter fraud from the November 8th election, at least at the state level. Can't speak for county DAs across the state of California, and I can't say something won't come forward in the future. But when you make allegations of 3, 4, 5 million cases of voter fraud throughout the country, that's impossible. That's impossible.
So again, you've called it dangerous, and I think you're questioning the motives, I think, of President Trump on launching what he calls this major investigation. Do you anticipate that this will be a fair investigation?
Well, if the first couple of days of the Trump administration, how they play fast and loose with the truth, and facts, I have cause for concern. Look, not just myself in California, but my colleagues throughout the country, we pride ourselves on free and fair elections, an elections process that is absolutely transparent and true to our small d democracy. And when you start questioning it, when you start creating doubts, that's taking a jackhammer to the bedrock of our democracy.
What does, that's a strong statement, saying a jackhammer to the bedrock of our democracy. He's called for a major investigation, a serious investigation. What, on the state level, because this is going to come down, even if it's a federal investigation, it's going to be coming into your state. What would a major investigation into voter fraud look like on the ground for you guys?
You know, in my opinion, a major investigation should start with the White House, including the president himself, reading the reports that's already out there. There is stuff from Loyola University, from the Pew Center for the States, from the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU. There's been report after report, study after study, investigation after investigation for years on these allegations of voter fraud. And what does each and every one turn up? Does it exist? Yes, but it is virtually non-existent. Small numbers compared to the millions and billions of ballots cast over the last several decades.
One study said 31 cases in a billion.
And that, I think that was over 10 years.
10 years over voter fraud. So that's not much. All right, Mr. Secretary Alex Padilla, thanks so much for being with us.
Let us know when you hear
time.
from the Justice Department. We appreciate it.
We'll do. We'll still wait.
Thank you. $3 to $5 million illegal votes. That is what the president says cost him the popular vote in November. As of yet, no evidence, though, has been offered to back that up. But they're now going even further, saying thousands of illegal voters in New Hampshire alone cost the president an election victory there. In a meeting with Democratic lawmakers just last week, Donald Trump pushed that very same point. And, I'm sorry, control room what? I'm sorry, I'm just getting some control room issue. Anyway, moving on. In a meeting with Democratic lawmakers just last week, the president claimed that voters were actually bussed in from Massachusetts to New Hampshire to vote illegally. Where is the evidence there? The president's senior policy advisor, Stephen Miller, didn't offer any of that up when he took to cameras over the weekend, but did have this to say.
And many, many highly qualified people, like Chris Kobach, the Kansas Secretary of State, have looked deeply into this issue and have confirmed it to be true and have put together evidence. And I suggest you invite Chris Kobach onto your show, and he can walk you through some of the evidence of voter fraud in greater detail.
All right, so joining me now to discuss is the Kansas Secretary of State, Chris Kobach, who was cited right there by Stephen Miller. So, Mr. Secretary, it's great to have you. Thanks so much for coming in. Stephen Miller says anyone who works in New Hampshire knows that this happened, except every big-name Republican there. Republicans I'm speaking to say that it did not happen. Miller says, look to you, sir, for the evidence. Where is it?
Okay, well, I just got off the phone with the New Hampshire Secretary of State, Bill Gardner, and he said this. So, as you know, New Hampshire is a same-day registration state. And on Election Day, November 8th, 2016, 6,000 people registered in New Hampshire using an out-of-state driver's license as their form of identification. Of those 6,000, over 6,000, just under 3,000, so just under half, used a Massachusetts driver's license. Now, some of those are going to be legit. They're going to be people who just moved to New Hampshire and hadn't yet got a New Hampshire driver's license. But many of those will be out-of-state residents who voted in the state. And then we will have more information at the end of this month because New Hampshire just joined a 30-state program where we compare data across states, and Kansas is the host of that program. And we will see how many people voted in both New Hampshire and in another state among the 29 other states. So we'll know exactly what that number is.
You truly do believe that thousands of people came in from Massachusetts to vote in New Hampshire on Election Day?
What I know from the New Hampshire Secretary of State's office is just under 3,000 registered on Election Day with a Massachusetts driver's license.
6,000.
And what I'm saying is 6,000 from some other state's driver's license. Of those 6,000, just under 3,000 were were Massachusetts. And so we do know that a lot of people did that, and we will have data at the end of the month how many of those 6,000 people voted in both New Hampshire and in one of the other states on Election Day in 2016.
Mr. Secretary, data at the end of the month, and you're saying, no, but here, wait a second. Stephen Miller, over the weekend, just yesterday, said that thousands did vote illegally. He said thousands and thousands did vote illegally, definitively saying that this actually happened. You're saying that there's going to be more data coming at the end of the month. So do you have the evidence?
Well, at the end of the month, New Hampshire just joined the program, by the way. So we won't. This is the first time we will be looking at New Hampshire's numbers. No, because Bill Gardner had already made public the fact that we had 6,000 people register in New Hampshire on Election Day with another state's driver's license. That's the key clue there. So we don't know what percentage of the 6,000
does not
voted in
equal
2
fraudulent
states.
votes. Voter registration problems does not equal
Correct.
fraudulent votes.
Sure. So let's step back and look at the big picture. So of the 30 states, we have about 3 million people who are registered in more than one state, and that's not a crime. That's just an administrative bookkeeping.
Including President's son-in-law, including the President's Treasury Secretary.
Exactly. Yeah, and many of your viewers are probably registered in more than one state. But what is a crime is if you actually vote in both of those states or in more than 2 states.
Of course it's a crime.
And every
but where
year,
is the evidence of this widespread, rampant, millions of people voting? If it had happened, why haven't we seen it, Secretary?
Well, actually, maybe I don't know if your network has covered it, but in my state, just people voting in Kansas and another state, my office prosecutes it. I just got
I think there's a lot of voter fraud. Right. Like I say, people don't realize certain neighborhoods in particular, they bust people around to vote.
They do what?
They bust them around. They put them in a bus and they move from the poll site to the poll site.
Like what kind of neighborhoods?
Oh, I don't want to say.
Oh, like minority neighborhoods, like black neighborhoods and Hispanic neighborhoods?
And Chinese too.
Oh. Why do they do that? Just to get like more votes for Democrats or?
Almost themselves. They're all running for office.
Oh yeah, for like their candidates for when they're.
For the assembly, for whatever. They get buses and they move people around.
Well, New York doesn't have voter ID laws, right? New
No,
York?
you can't. You cannot ask.
They what?
They can't ask for voter ID.
Why's that? They can't.
The law. The law says you can't ask somebody, which they really should be able to do. You know, I don't think it's too much to ask somebody to show some kind of an ID.
Yeah. I mean, why not? I mean, you have to show an ID for everything else.
Right, you go into a building, you got to show them your ID.
Well, you're the commissioner, you said, of the Democratic election commissioner. So if you think there's voter fraud and you think there should be voter ID, why don't people listen to you? I mean...
Well, that's because the New York State legislature makes the laws. I don't make the laws.
And you think there's a lot of absentee ballot fraud, too?
Oh, there's thousands of absentee ballots. I know where they came from.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, Hillary Clinton doesn't support voter ID laws. Like,
I know. That's why I'm not always crazy about everything the Democrats do either. Blasio just gave out ID cards.
He what?
He gave out ID cards to Blasio. You don't have, that's in lieu of a driver's license, that you can use it for anything. Well, they didn't vet the people to see who they really are. Anybody could go in there and say, I'm Joe Smith, I want an ID card. It's absurd. You're going to see a lot of fraud. Not just voter fraud, all kinds of fraud.
What a waste of taxpayer money.
That's why I'm getting more conservative as I get older.
Well, maybe you won't vote for Hillary. I don't know.
I would, but I have no choice.
Well, not only just like voter ID because of like voting twice, but like people can like cover their faces. You know what I'm saying? Like
All the Muslims could do that too. You know who they are.
De Blasio wants to let them in New York.
He doesn't care. What does he care? Who's going to pay for it? You are. Your tax money.
The Muslims, yeah, especially like all those burqas. Like someone could claim, oh, it's my religion, but then you don't know if they're pretending or not.
Exactly. Your vote isn't really counted because they can go in there with a burqa on and you don't know if they're a voter.
You don't what?
Yes. Your vote gets discounted because they come in with a burqa on it and they can vote. People think, it's a liberal thing to do, but I take my vote seriously. And I don't want 10 other people coming in negating my vote by voting for the other candidate when they're not even registered voters.
Are you